So, whenever you're ready.
Hey guys, I'll just share my video so you can see me. Hello. And also what I'll do is I will share my screen. And what we'll do is we're not going to talk for too long. We're going to just read the Bible. It's a reasonably long chapter. So we'll read the whole chapter and then we'll just comment one main characteristic of David. Or I might stop it throughout actually I will stop it throughout the chapter and we'll just talk as we go. Okay, so in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, I'm going. Feel free to ask questions. I don't know if you can unmute yourselves. I don't know what Daniel's done. Or just write some questions and then I'll get to them when I can. In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, I'm going. So I'll just open on my Bible because that video thing is blocking half my screen. So it's 2 Samuel chapter 19. And just by way of introduction to this chapter, there's a few significant events that have happened prior to this that kind of lead into this chapter. Number one is David's son. So David's house went into anarchy. Okay, he's the king of Israel. His house went into chaos, especially when his son Absalom tried to take over his throne. His son Absalom killed his half-brother because he had raped Absalom's sister. And ever since that point, the relationship with Absalom and his family was a bit skewed. And Absalom eventually tried to overtake his father's kingdom. And he did so. He did. He ran David and his men out. He humiliated David in front of the world. And then they had a war. David's army was more experienced and won the war. In the process, Absalom died. And that's what happened at the end of last chapter, where David mourned the loss of Absalom more than he rejoiced in the war that he'd won. At the same time, when David first got kicked out of his kingdom, on his way out, there was a few incidents that happened that attempted a humiliation of him. For example, there was one guy called Shimei, S-H-I-M-E-I, Shimei, who abused David as David was making his way out of Jerusalem when Absalom was overtaking the kingdom. And David ignored him, walked, and was humiliated in front of him. So he'll feature again in this chapter. There's another person also in this chapter 16, so 3 chapters ago, who also featured a guy called Mephibosheth and his servant called Ziba. Mephibosheth was Saul's son, I think, one of his sons, who David, or Jonathan's son, I think, one of them. Can't remember which one it was, but David honored him for the sake of Jonathan, and he gave him a good position in his kingdom, even though he was lame in his feet. He was, I think, dropped at birth, and he was lame in his feet, and David honored him. And then on his way to go to war, David, to fight against Absalom, Mephibosheth did not go with David because he was deceived by his servant Ziba. So Ziba told David that Mephibosheth was trying to take over David's kingdom, as if he was an enemy. And Ziba himself helped David, but Mephibosheth kind of sat in his house the whole time. He didn't really help David, but he was tricked by this servant Ziba. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Okay, because that's all going to come into play during this chapter. Okay, a few other characters as well. Joab is the leader of David's army. Amasa was the leader of Absalom's army. And Barzillai was one of David's leading officers as well. So we're going to go through each of these characters because David interacts with a whole bunch of characters in this chapter. So we'll go through them bit by bit and try and learn a couple of lessons from David. In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. So 2 Samuel chapter 19. And Joab was told, behold, the king is weeping and mourning for Absalom. So the victory that day was turned into mourning for all the people. For the people heard it said that day, the king is grieved for his son. And the people stole back into the city that day as people who are ashamed steal away when they flee in battle. But the king covered his face. But the king covered his face with a loud voice, "O my son Absalom, O Absalom, my son, my son." Then Joab came into the house to the king and said, "Today you have disgraced all your servants who today have saved your lives, the lives of your sons and daughters, the lives of your wives, and the lives of your concubines, in that you love your enemies and hate your friends. For you have declared today you regard neither princes nor servants. For today I perceive that if Absalom had lived and all of us had died today, then it would have pleased you well. Now therefore, arise, go out and speak comfort to your servants. For I swear by the Lord, if you do not go out, and not one will stay with you this night, and that will be worse for you than all the evil that has befallen you from your youth until now." Then the king arose and sat in the gate, and they told all the people, saying, "There is the king sitting in the gate." So all the people came before the king, for everyone of Israel had fled to his tent. Okay, I'll just change what I'm sharing. Give me a second. Okay, so what we're going to focus on today is David's humility. David's humility in that, and later at the end of this chapter, I'll just give you a commentary from Untitled Chapter showing that David reflects Christ in the way he deals with people. Okay, but one of the primary characteristics that David displays in this chapter is this level of humility. And we'll talk about a couple of things that he did and how it reflects his humility. The first one is this incident where he is upset for his son. Okay, and even Untitled Chapter comments on this. Why is the Bible commenting on David's love of his son compared to the people? He comments that it shows that even for the saints, their natural affection to the natural family, is very deep, and it's very hard for them to love everyone the same as their family, let alone for the saints. But it is, of course, something that servants and us as Christians are meant to love all the same. But he says that, but David, in this case, he's sad that his son is dead, Absalom, and the whole people are terrified to celebrate in front of David because David is miserable that he's lost his son. And Joab, the head of the army, the one who killed Absalom, okay, he's the one who killed Absalom. He's the problem. He rebukes David and says, "You disgraced us. You love your enemies more than us. It's a shame. If we all had died, you would have been happier." In a sense, he's right. What he's saying is correct, that David has to respect them, has to respect the people that have fought for him. However, he's exaggerated. He doesn't hate his friends and love his enemies. He's just sad that he's lost his son. But to show the depth of David's humility is that he allows himself to be rebuked by this man Joab. Even though Joab is underneath him, he is sad, he's angry, he's frustrated. He has a reason to be sad and angry and frustrated and to ignore Joab, but he does not ignore Joab, nor does he not just ignore him, but he obeys him. He listens to him. He sees the wisdom in what Joab is saying. And he changes his way. He absorbs his emotion and sits on the gate to celebrate as king and to return as king. And he knew, for sure he knew, that Joab was the problem with his son. We don't know that for sure. It hasn't been written. But he knows the aggression of this man Joab. He's not the first time he's killed one of David's enemies or appeared errant enemies. And he's going to do it again in the next chapter, I think. And not enemy, but someone that threatens his position. So David is even then willing to accept Joab's rebuke. One of the signs that I am humble is that I can tolerate to be rebuked. I can tolerate it even from the people below me. Not that I think, this person's better than me, this person's higher than me, therefore I'll tolerate it. But anyone else, no, they wouldn't open their mouth against me, or I couldn't tolerate it. Emotionally, I couldn't handle it. I certainly wouldn't listen to them. So one of the signs in David that he could tolerate this kind of rebuke it's a symbol of his humility, that he's able to handle rebuke and even listen, obey. And we said it in the last chapter that the same thing, that he obeyed someone below him. So David is very, very meek, and he shows that even though he's king and he's a powerful king, he's a warrior king, but he's a wise king. But still he listens. Still he takes stock. He listens to those underneath him. He's able to be told off and doesn't disturb him. It doesn't disturb his inner peace that I've been told off by someone younger than me, smaller than me, less than me. And Joab is morally much less than David as well. So we allow ourselves to be rebuked. It's a symbol of my humility. When I'm so disturbed that I've been rebuked and something's wrong, so I have to be careful of that. I have to be able to tolerate rebuke as part of my humility. All right, now we'll continue reading from verse 9. Sorry, I'll just kind of switch back if I can to the other. Now all the people were in a dispute throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, "The king saved us from the hand of our enemies. He delivered us from the hand of the Philistines. And now he has fled from the land because of Absalom. But Absalom, whom we anointed over us, has died in battle. Now therefore, why do you say nothing about bringing back the king?" But then King David sent Zadok and Abiathar the priests, saying, "Speak to the elders of Judah, saying, why are you the last to bring the king back to his house, since the words of all Israel have come to the king, even to his house? You are my brethren, you are my bone and my flesh. Why then are you the last to bring back the king?" I'd like to just focus on that. So just to put this bit in context, what's happened is there was a civil war, Absalom versus David. David wins the civil war, but there was a group of people that were traitors to David in this process. They went against him, they turned against him. Part of that was Judah. So the tribes of Israel were broken up. There was 12 tribes, 10 of which were Israel, 2 of which were Judah. The tribes of Judah, right, they supported Absalom more. So this little scene is to show David's peacemaking, the wisdom of David. He's saying, they're saying, "Oh, how come you didn't bring him back?" and things like that. And David sends his 2 priests saying, "Speak to the people of Judah and tell them, how come you're the last?" He invites them to, "Aren't you my bone and my flesh?" He says, he kind of reconciling with them. He's not problem focused. He's not focused that you insulted me, you betrayed me, you put me down, you attacked me when I was weak. He's just solution focused. He sees that I'd like to reconcile. Now is not the time for war. Now is the time for peace. And he reconciles and resolves the problem. Again, it's a symbol of his humility. There's very few kings that will tolerate this. Very few. Any king that is insulted or betrayed in that way puts to death, or wipes out, or closes off, or taxes, or does something to the people that turn against him, but not David. David sends his priests to make conditions of peace. It's very meek, to make peace with anyone, no matter what they did. It's a symbol of my meekness. It's a symbol of my meekness. Pride blocks me from reconciling. I cannot tolerate the insult. As I said before, David he couldn't only just be rebuked, but he could be insulted, humiliated, and still he would make peace. Even though he was king, there's no one in a kingdom that could make them pay like David could, but he would not make them pay. He just made peace. And he just says, "Well, aren't you flesh and you are my bone and my flesh. Why then are you the last to bring back the king?" Then he addresses the next person. So as I said, he addresses person by person. So first he deals with Joab. Second, he deals with the people that went against him. Next, he'll deal with Amasa, who is the commander of Absalom's army. So the commander of his enemy's army. Almost surely would be put to death in almost every other setting. So verse 13. "And say to Amasa, are you not my bone and my flesh?" So he says the same language to Amasa. "God, do so to me, and more also, if you are not commander of the army before me continually in place of Joab." And he swayed the hearts of all the men of Judah, just as the heart of one man so that they sent this word to the king, return you and all your servants. So he takes Amasa, the commander of the neighboring army, but he also uses the opportunity to get rid of Joab. Joab is too aggressive, he's too arrogant, he's too not, he's an angry person. He's an angry person, and he keeps getting David into problems and not listening and killing people that. At the same time, he's a wise general for sure, but he's too aggressive for David. So David tries to take the chance to remove Joab and put Amasa, who he considers a good man, as his army leader. However, Joab eventually murders Amasa, I believe, as he did the previous one. A guy called Abner did the same thing, I think. And so David even forgives Amasa, who's his enemy. So we now have David tolerating rebuke. We have him reconciling with people that turned against him. We have him forgiving his enemies. All symbols of humility, being able to take someone who has been repeatedly insulting me, repeatedly against me, to forgive them, to be able to tolerate the insult. So that's another symbol of humility in David. And then you see that, again, when we kind of refer to this later when we talk about how David was a symbol of Christ, but you see that he brought the hearts of all men as one. He brought the hearts of all men as one, which is the power of humility. When someone has humility, when someone behaves with humility, all men are drawn to that person as one. Everyone is drawn to a humble person. People cannot help it. It's like, there's fly zapping machines. Can't help it. The fly flies towards. All men are drawn to humility. They can't help it. They become as one. They become peaceful. They become joyful. They become loving. That is the power of a humble person in amongst people that are actually very aggressive at war. But there's a humble person in their midst, and it creates peace. It creates one heart, which is the only way that God can function. God can only function when there's one heart, one mind. It's not about wisdom. It's not about intellect. It's not about power. It's about one heart, one mind, which comes through humility. It's the only method. And of course, it's the same way that Christ was, but we'll get to that in a minute. So as one heart, they brought the king back. So now we'll read verse 15. And the king turned and came to the Jordan, and Judah came to Gilgal. And Judah came to Gilgal to go to meet the king, to escort the king across the Jordan. So now Judah is the first ones to bring him back because they're trying to make up for what they did. And Shimei, remember the one I told you before, that as David was leaving when he was losing to Absalom's army, he was insulting David and saying, "We don't want you as a king anymore, David." And Shimei, the son of Gera, a Benjamite, who was from Bahurim, hastened and came down with the men of Judah to meet King David. There were 1,000 men of Benjamin with him, and Ziba, the servant of the house of Saul, and his 15 sons and his 20 servants with him. And they went over the Jordan before the king. So the other person that's with him, so there's Shimei, the one who insulted David, and Ziba, the one who deceived David against Mephibosheth. Remember I said that at the beginning. And they went over the Jordan before the king. Then a ferry boat went across to carry over the king's household to do what he thought good. Now Shimei, the son of Gera, fell down before the king when he had crossed the Jordan. Then he said to the king, "Do not let my lord impute iniquity to me, or remember what wrong your servant did on the day that my lord the king left Jerusalem, that the king should take it to heart. For I, your servant, know that I have sinned. Therefore here I am, the first to come today of all the house of Joseph, to go down to meet my lord the king." And Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, so he's Joab's brother, also quite aggressive, answered and said, "Shall not Shimei be put to death for this, because he cursed the Lord's anointed?" And David said, "What have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah, that you should be adversaries to me today? Shall any man be put to death today in Israel? For do I not know that today I am king over Israel?" Therefore the king said to Shimei, you shall not die. And the king swore to him. Sorry, I didn't follow with the screen. All right, so it's a really nice story there of David's interaction with Shimei. Shimei insulted him. David was encouraged to kill him by this Abishai. But King David says, this is a joyful day. I am the king of Israel. No one is to die today on my account. No one. And so he lets Shimei live. By the way, later on, David orders Saul not to let Shimei go to his grave in peace, i.e. he orders his execution. He ordered Solomon, his son. And so you'd think, all right, so he let him go now just to execute him later. It's not true. David had no choice but to stabilize Solomon's kingdom, to warn him about certain characters that would destabilize Solomon's kingdom. So for the sake of his son, he said, these are certain people that must be removed for you to have a stable kingdom. Solomon, in his meekness, told Shimei that you just have to stay in this area. If you go outside this area, I'll kill you. Otherwise, I won't kill you. And Shimei, of course, went out of the area and Solomon had him killed. So David did order Solomon to kill him, but not out of wrath, not out of vengeance, not out of hatred. It was for the sake of his son, just warning him that this person is going to cause you problems. But he himself all his life tolerated the man. He himself all his life didn't kill him. He didn't take vengeance for himself. It is another symbol of a humble person. They will never defend themselves. Humble person will defend others. That will defend his son. He needs to look after him. So he will defend him, and with a mighty hand, but not himself. David, all throughout, I would struggle to find an example where David defended himself. There was one time when he was insulted by, I can't remember the guy's name. And when he's met his wife, Abigail, the husband of Abigail was a lousy man, and he insulted David and his men. David went to go kill the man. So Abigail came and said, listen, you're a wise man. You don't need to kill him. Please don't. Don't worry about him. And David said, I almost made a mistake, and thank you that you stopped me, because he almost defended himself. And then what happened? God defended him. That man died a violent death from the hands of God. So a humble person will not defend himself. He will defend others, but he'll never defend his honor, his dignity. David was insulted. So for him, there's nothing to be revenged. There's nothing to be dealt with, because anything against me doesn't need to be dealt with. If you insult Solomon, Solomon must kill you. If you're going to destabilize Solomon's kingdom, Solomon must do with you. And I'll defend Solomon, but not me. I'll never defend my own self. And it is a real characteristic of humility that you wouldn't defend yourself in the same way that Jesus himself didn't defend himself. Jesus never defended himself. He defended what was right, but he never defended himself. He didn't stop consequences coming to him. He healed others, but himself he didn't heal. He saved others, himself he didn't save. Same as David. David wouldn't defend himself. And when you don't defend yourself, God defends you. That's the mechanism. So it's not that God is unfair. It's not that you won't suffer from not defending yourself. You will, but God will defend you. In the end, God is righteous, and he looks after his people. So vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. It's God's problem if you don't defend yourself. When he sees someone not defending himself, he sees his own son. So you have to really understand that we don't defend ourselves. We defend others. But us, we don't defend ourselves. When I am insulted, I tolerate it, because God will defend me. And it is a symbol of my humility. Someone who's proud cannot tolerate it. They must defend themselves. But for someone who's humble, they don't need to. They know the situation. God knows the whole background, and they know God is watching. They're fully aware that God is watching them. So they don't need to defend themselves. They know God is righteous. He's going to sort this thing out. So there's really no need to defend yourself. God will defend you, but you defend others. Sometimes, like St. Paul, for example, he had to defend himself for the dignity of the service. So if you call St. Paul a liar, he says, well, no, actually, the apostles are not liars, and we can't have the apostles walking around people thinking they're liars. So he'll correct a problem, but not defend. St. Paul was a similar style where he didn't defend himself. He was the least amongst brethren. So another symbol of humility is that someone who's humble wouldn't defend himself. So as I said, he'll tolerate rebuke from Joab. He will reconcile with those who have caused problems for him or turned against him. He will he'll forgive his enemies. He will bring all the hearts together. He will never defend himself, as he did with Shimei. All right, next is Mephibosheth. Now Mephibosheth, we said Mephibosheth was the son of Saul. Here we go. There it is. I got confused between Saul and Jonathan. The son of Saul, he honored because of his love for Jonathan. And, so Mephibosheth was disabled, and he had a servant called Ziba, and Ziba, the scoundrel, deceived David, and then came with Shimei to come and say, oh, look, we're really sorry about what happened. Now Mephibosheth, the son of Saul, came down to meet the king, and he had not cared for his feet, nor trimmed his mustache, nor washed his clothes, from the day the king departed until the day that he had came back in peace. So when he had come to Jerusalem to meet the king, that the king said to him, why did you not go out with me, Mephibosheth? And he answered, my lord, O king, my servant deceived me. For your servant said, I will saddle a donkey for myself, that I may ride on it and go to the king, because your servant is lame. And he has slandered your servant to my lord the king, but my lord the king is like the angel of God. Therefore do what is good in your eyes. For all of my father's house were but dead men before my lord the king. Yet you set your servant among those who eat at your own table. Therefore, what right have I still to cry out any more to the king? So this Mephibosheth, once Ziba said, oh, you look, Mephibosheth trying to take your kingdom, O King David. King David said, fine, Ziba, you own his household now. Everything he has is yours. Then now Mephibosheth comes and says, well, look, I was hard done by. He was lying. He made me look bad. It's not true. And look, I've been sitting in my house miserable the whole time you've been away. So the king responds. So the king said to him, why do you speak any more of your matters? I have said, you and Ziba divide the land. Then Mephibosheth said to the king, rather let him take it all, inasmuch as my lord the king has come back in peace to his own house. So then David says, fine, split it between the two of you. Now, it's really interesting, like, why did he not defend Mephibosheth completely? Like, why did he let Ziba get away with it? So I'm just trying to, can't get a sludge. There we go. Why did he not put Ziba in his place and give Mephibosheth his land back? One commentary, I think it was John Chrysostom, I think, one of the fathers, was saying, actually, well, there's wisdom to it. There must have been more to the story, more to the betrayal of Mephibosheth. Maybe there was more to it. Maybe he really didn't want to help his master. Maybe. The other thing is that David was unsure. So he split it 50-50. He's not 100% sure who's lying. So he splits it 50-50. The third thing is that, and I think this is very important for the topic of humility, is that humble people don't have favorites. They don't favor one or the other. They kind of love everyone. So he says, look, I don't want to hear about the problems. Divide the land between the two of you. Another commentary as well, Untitled said that maybe Ziba helped David in the war, so he couldn't come back now and take away his land. We're not sure. But one interesting commentary here by Gregory the Great about the humble, it's not unusual for the humble to be deceived. And so one of the characteristics of humility, one of the things that may happen when I am meek and is that someone may take advantage of me, but even then, God will bless you. So this is Gregory the Great speak to someone called Peter. Why are you surprised, Peter, that we who are but human make mistakes? Have you forgotten that it was David's reliance on the untruthful words of a servant that caused him to pronounce sentence against the innocent son of Jonathan? And David had the spirit of prophecy. But since David did this, we can be sure that in God's secret judgment, he acted justly, even though we cannot see the justice of it with our human reason. Why should we be surprised then if we who are not prophets are sometimes led astray by deceitful people? An important point to consider is that the mind of a superior is distracted by a world of cares, and once the attention is preoccupied with a variety of matters, he becomes less observant of details. One who is occupied with a multitude of affairs is all the more liable to be misled in regard to any one of them. So what he's saying is that yes, this guy deceived David. This guy Ziva deceived David, and perhaps David's judgment seemed wrong. But in fact, when you're humble, that the judgment of God would come through you, even in spite of you being deceived. Anyway, sorry. So even though you did, so it's a really nice quote there saying that even if you're, and when you're distracted by doing all sorts of good things, he's saying the superior, but really people that are distracted by doing all sorts of good things, to be deceived, don't be so disturbed. It's okay. Like God will still work in you. And it's not always your problem to make sure that everyone around you is honest. If they're dishonest, God will still work through you and he'll defend you and he'll look after you. That's one of the glories of being humble. Some of the protection of being humble, even if someone is dishonest with you and they'll call you a fool. How could you fall for that? No, it's okay, because in my honesty, I fell for it. In my integrity, I fell for it. So I fell for it. I'm making a decision based on information that someone has deceived me with. So we don't get disturbed by that kind of thing, as David did it. Now we'll get back to the Bible. And now he deals with Barzillai. In verse 31. And Barzillai the Gileadite came down from Rogilim and went across the Jordan with the king to escort him across the Jordan. Now Barzillai was a very aged man, 80 years old, and he had provided the king with supplies while he stayed at Mahanaim, where he was a very rich man. And the king said to Barzillai, "Come across with me, and I will provide for you while you are with me in Jerusalem." But Barzillai said to the king, "How long have I to live, that I should go up with the king to Jerusalem?" But Barzillai said to the king, "How long have I to live, that I should go up with the king to Jerusalem? I am today 80 years old. Can I discern between the good and bad? Can your servant taste what I eat or what I drink? Can I hear any longer the voice of singing men and singing women? Why then should your servant be a further burden to my lord the king? Your servant will go a little way across the Jordan with the king. And why should the king repay me with such a reward? Please let your servant turn back again, that I may die in my own city, near the grave of my father and mother. But here is your servant, Chimham," that's his son. So Barzillai gives him his son, Chimham. "Let him cross over with my lord the king, and do for him what seems good to you." And the king answered, "Chimham shall cross over with me, and I will do for him what seems good to you. Now, whatever you request of me, I will do for you." Then all the people went over the Jordan, and when the king had crossed over, the king kissed Barzillai and blessed him and returned to his own place. So again, he deals with Barzillai in a really, really gentle way, because Barzillai is a good man. He's done good for King David. So he grants him his request. It doesn't disturb him at all to accept the request of him. And then he honors him through his children. So the honesty of and the integrity of David, that he would, even though he can't reward Barzillai, he will reward his children. So there's a nice little interaction there between David and Barzillai. Now, and so we'll read this last little section now. Now the king went on to Gilgal, and Chimham went on with him. And all the people of Judah escorted the king, and also half the people of Israel. Just then all the men of Israel came to the king and said to the king, "Why have our brethren, the men of Judah, stolen your way and brought the king, his household, and all David's men with him across the Jordan?" So they're saying now, all the guys that kind of were against you, now they're the first ones to bring you back. We want to be the ones, the first ones to bring you back. So all the men of Judah answered the men of Israel, "Because the king is a close relative of ours, why then are you angry over this matter? Have we ever eaten at the king's expense, or has he given us any gift? And the men of Israel answered the men of Judah and said, we have 10 shares in the king. Therefore, we also have more right to David than you. Why then do you despise us? Were we not the first to advise bringing back our king? Yet the words of the men of Judah were fiercer than the words of the men of Israel. Just by the way, so they had a little argument about David, who's going to bring him back and who's going to be the priority. So they're trying to take honor. By the way, this little scene at the end here, it's kind of the opposite of humility. They're trying to take their dignity, they're trying to take their honor. And then, part of the symbol of it, of their arrogance, or it's not proper the way they're dealing, is that the words of the men of Judah were fiercer than the words of the men of Israel. So the method of winning an argument in those who are proud or arrogant or is that their words are fiercer. They're more angry. They overpower the person in front of them. It's not the proper way when it comes to Christianity or dealing with other people. I'll just share one last commentary from Father Tabas Malati on the way that David, what's happening? David symbolizes Christ, especially in this scene. So he says he encounters different people along the way, and as Christ brought different types of people to him, so did David bring together different types of people. So he says, with the church as a whole, symbolized by the tribe of Judah, to enjoy the union with him as his one body. So he brings everyone together as one body, while at the same time caring for Amasa as a sign of his care for every single member. So he's not only caring for the whole body, but the details within the body. Same as David. He wants the whole region to be together, but also he cares for the people involved. He also cares about those who have fallen, the sinners, who are repentant. So Shimei comes and says, I'm sorry. He says, fine, I'll accept you back. So the repentant sinners, he'll take back. He also cares about the souls that have lied and deceived and now are coming also back for repentance. He'll accept them back in the same way Christ did. He also cares for those souls that are broken and afflicted. So he doesn't just care for the broken and afflicted souls. He cares for those who have broken the afflicted souls, which is Ziba. But also those who are broken, he cares about, which is Mephibosheth. Also, he cares about those who are honest and pious and righteous, like Barzillai. They only care for the partying for the world. So there's righteous people as well, and God cares for them. Christ cared for them. He also cares for the souls that are new to the faith, as the son of Barzillai, Chimham, the son of Barzillai, to grant them authority and to dwell inside them. So you see that the way that Abu Tawas Malati's commentary there is really interesting, that he's bringing all the people together, all different types, the good, the bad, the different types of sinners. Everyone is brought together. He cares for details as well as the corporate as well as the individual. So it's a really nice commentary there, the way David interacts. And again, Christ did that through his humility. The way that St. Paul says that Christ did that, he says, let this mind be in you that is in Christ, that he humbled himself, he emptied himself, he made himself as nothing. Before and he didn't consider it robbery didn't grasp at the Godhead, although he is God. Okay, they don't have any questions. I can see here in the chat that there's some people have questions. Give me a second. Yeah, so one question that came is, people can see it as weakness if we don't defend ourselves. And that's the reality. Yes, if you don't defend yourself, some people, the arrogant people, will see it as weakness. There's no question about it. But it's not from weakness that we don't defend ourselves. It's from a position of strength. David was in a position of strength when he didn't defend himself. But he chose not to. So some enemies, some arrogant people see it as a sign of weakness in David. But holy people see it as a sign of strength. And in fact, in him, it was a sign of strength, because he showed that he had the power to defend himself. He chose not to. I think there was one of the fruits of the Spirit. I think it's, which one is it? I think long suffering. I think long suffering is actually the word used for a king who is able to wield the sword, he's able to bring vengeance on the guilty, and he's tolerant and he's patient to not wield the sword. So he is the king, he has the authority to take action, but he chooses not to. Of course, part of the problem is sometimes we don't defend ourselves out of weakness. I'm genuinely afraid, or courage is a problem. Now, it's not a huge weakness, and it is what it is. Sometimes I struggle to defend myself, but it is a weakness that I have to work on. But that's not why I don't defend myself. I have to be clear. I have the choice, I have the capacity, I have the position, but I choose not to. And even if I don't have all those things, even if I did, I would not. So what happens is you never defend yourself in any circumstance with the least to the most. So that when I'm facing the greatest, where I really am not in a position to defend myself, I am sure in my mind that no, I didn't defend myself out of choice, So even when a child rebukes me, I wouldn't say anything. Anyone rebukes me, I wouldn't, because it's a choice. So even if I could, I would not. David was in a position where he could and did not. So yes, it may be seen as a sign of weakness, but in front of God, it's not a sign of weakness at all. And that's who we really care about. Another question is, shouldn't we not defend others as well? Because God will defend them. Well, sometimes we're in a position to defend others. We don't have a choice. For example, a father with children. A father must defend his children. A husband must defend his wife. Brothers often must defend one another. A nation, a kingdom, the soldiers must defend the citizens. So sometimes we have no choice. We must defend others. If we're able to do it in a peaceful way, of course, we do it peacefully. We try and encourage the person not to fight for themselves. Don't worry, God will look after you. But we may be in a position sometimes to defend the weak, people who cannot defend themselves, the elderly, the disabled, the children, anyone who needs defending. So sometimes we need to defend. We need to defend people. But if we can get away with it, of course, we try and make the most peaceful path. And yes, Caroline said that, and he cares for the ones who would see him dead. Yes, he does. And same as Jesus. So the next question is, David was able to have mercy on so many people and care about their worries during the time of his grief for his son. How did he do that? The simple answer to that is what I've been saying the whole time, which is humility. He was a meek person. You know, I said this before and I'll say it again. C.S. Lewis' definition of what it means to be humble. He says, it's not thinking of yourself less, but thinking less of yourself. Or not thinking less of yourself. So not putting yourself down. So let me put it right. Not putting yourself down, not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less, thinking of other people more. So at the start, David was absorbed in his grief. Then when Job rebuked him, he said, you're right. These people don't deserve to be sad just because I am sad. So he's not absorbed with his own emotion, doesn't project his emotion to others. He says, you're right. They should be happy. They did fight for something. It's not their son that's died. So why should I? And then he starts caring about all the people that he realized he wasn't caring for. It's a symbol of, it's part of the humility that I put other people's emotions first. That I care about them, not out of putting myself down. Oh, I'm useless. Who cares about me? I know God will look after my emotions. I have emotions. I'm sad. God will look after them. God will be with me. He'll care for me. He'll strengthen me. But it's up to me to look after those people around that God has given me to look after. So David, the simple answer to that is humility. The more I'm able to care about others, the more I'm able to put others first, the more I'm able, even in hard times, is to care for the concerns of others more than my own, even when I need. And the gift, as I said, there's gifts for humility. As I said, it will bring everyone together. Everyone looks to him. Everyone is drawn to him. Everyone loves him. But also God defends him. Also God looks after him. Also God resolves his emotion. So God looks after him in every way. Another question, what about? What about when someone makes the argument that he is weaker now perhaps in faith. Of course, David went through a low point when he committed that sin. But David's faith in God is strong all the way through, all the way through. Even later on, when he does like a census and he says, "I'd rather be in the hands of God than anyone else." David's faith is strong all the way through, like when he dealt with Goliath. Perhaps in his youth and his vigor, he was zealous for God in a way that he's willing to fight a Goliath, but his faith was always strong. David, as I said before, it doesn't need much commentary. You can read his story. You can just admire him, the way he deals with everyone and everything. Yes, he had a low point, but and he suffered for that low point, but he he was very righteous in front of God. And in fact, he's so righteous that God would continue blessing people for generations for the sake of David. King Solomon had to execute certain people for his kingdom's stability. Does this same concept apply for the church, to exclude certain people for church stability? It doesn't. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily apply in the same way. It needs wisdom. It needs wisdom. But yes, even St. Paul said that when someone refuses to turn and someone's a heretic, and no matter what we do, then he says, you leave them to the devil, they will turn. So what sometimes is necessary, and this needs guidance of the priests and the other head servants of the church, that if someone is causing lots of problems in the church, temporarily, you would serve them outside. You never ignore them. You never stop praying for them. Even Samuel said, far be it from me that I would stop praying for you. But someone is causing repeated problems for everyone in the church in the sense of losing souls, creating conflict. And sometimes, yes, they have to be served outside for a period of time until they're able to be reintegrated. In the same way that, for example, the society does it through prison. Society does through prison until people are able to be reintegrated, ideally, if the prison system is running right and things like that. So, but generally speaking, the vast majority of people don't need to be excluded. So I don't think it's something we need to think about too much. It's very rare, and normally, if it's very big, on a big scale, the bishops will deal with it. If sometimes in a parish, a priest would say, you know what, this person needs to be served outside for a short period of time, or the church would excommunicate someone for a period, but then accept their repentance later on. It does happen that way sometimes, but the very, very, very vast majority, that's not the reality. The reality is nurturing with love and care and gentleness will deal with most problems. So is it guaranteed that if we choose not to defend, we can rest assured that God will? Will it always be God's will? God will always defend you, but not necessarily in the way that you think. Not necessarily in the way that you think. For example, Ziba in this chapter, to deceive David, David in the end gave Ziba half the land. So by all rights, as Gregory the Great was saying, why shouldn't all the land have gone back to Mephibosheth? It didn't go back to Mephibosheth. It didn't go back. I just read the cough question. It didn't go back to Mephibosheth because God was defending him in another way. Perhaps there was more integrity in Ziba. Maybe God wanted to do it in another way. Perhaps there's more to the story. Perhaps this guy's not as guilty as that. So maybe I'm being attacked, but sometimes I deserve to be attacked. Maybe he's not as wrong as that. Maybe I'm wrong in this city. Maybe I need to be rebuked. For example, Joab, when he attacked David at the beginning of the chapter, he needed to be rebuked. He needed to pick himself up. Maybe God has a different time to deal with this person. Maybe he's going to deal with that person in a different way than what I understand, because that person's salvation needs it. So we don't know. But rest assured, God will always defend you. It will always turn to your good, always, if you don't defend yourself. If you defend yourself, you're in your own hands. It comes out how you want. If you're stronger, it comes out in your favor. If you're weaker, it comes out against you. You're in your own hands. And if God to defend you, it's a promise that you'll be looked after, 100%. That's my 9th cough. I should have been worried. Now I'm all good. I just had a bit of a cold this week. I'm all good. Thank you. What if I'm the person who has pride and cannot control it and it destroys people's relationships with you? So is that referring, I'm guessing that's referring to the question where it's served outside? No, if I recognize in me that there's a problem and I'm sometimes a bit destroying relationships or I'm not dealing with people in the right way, it's something that I take up with my confession father. I don't exclude myself from the church. It's not the proper way. If you need to be excluded, by all means, the priest will exclude you, but it's not up to me to decide that. It's up to the powers of the church that God has given them. So no, I should never exclude myself. And even if I feel like I'm not doing the right thing by people or in service, it's not for you to decide. It's up to God to decide. I just do the best I can. If I'm struggling with a certain mistake, I work on it. Talk to my confession father. I try and deal with it in the best way I can. I recognize the problem. Part of the solution is recognizing the problem. You talk, but the best thing is just talk to your confession father. He will guide you in how to deal with things like that. But no, I shouldn't exclude myself. Any other questions or comments that anyone wants to add? I think I went through all of them. Just going to unshare my screen now. All right. I'll leave it to you, Anthony. Glory be to God. Thank you for listening, guys. Thanks for joining us. It's really nice to have everyone here together, asking questions and thinking through the Bible with us. And I know it's, I think we're doing very well. I think you guys are doing really, really well. Be patient and use this time in a really, really positive way as best you can. There's so much good to come from this time. The church services are expanding in the way we're able to do them. So the church is even able to do good things with it. So you and your homes are also able to, you and your families are able to do good things. So really, really do the best you can to enjoy this time with God and developing good hobbies, habits, and really loving relationships at home. If anyone needs anything, the fathers are always available to you. So please call us anytime, message us anytime. We are available to you anytime. And God bless you guys. Now, Anthony, I'll leave it to you to take over.
Alrighty, thank you.